welcome. I'm going to invite everyone into some breath and just some awakening movement, sort of stretching and feeling.
I think you can put the music a little bit more, the volume.
Okay, how is that? Okay, so I'm going to invite you to roll your shoulders back, open your heart. And move to the rhythm of your breath. Bringing it down to your hips. And there's an interesting connection between the hips and the jaw. So be sure to open your mouth. Stretch your lips, your teeth, your tongue, everything in the mouth.
Are you sharing the music from the share screen option?
Yep, I am. Can you hear it okay?
It's not so good.
Is that better? All right, so I'm going to try a different track. I think we're just gathering.
Can you try to do the share screen option again?
Okie doke, I will do that. It's actually asking for a password. So we're going to pause on the music since I'm having technical difficulties. But I am going to ask one really deep hip roll. I want you to get into your pelvic bowl and make some of your own sound. So even if you can't hear each other, I want you to open the vagal nerve with some toning. Beautiful. So it's sweet to gather as we're coming together. I'm going to invite you to stay in your body, in your breath. Sometimes with these, festivals, we have to do a little bit of shape-shifting and time traveling so that we put ourselves in festival mode. And so I want to thank Sharon for being my tech support. And if you have any questions or needs, go ahead and write to everyone or to her. I won't be reading the comments. And other housekeeping up front is that we have an hour and a half, which is actually the shortest time I've ever taught this subject matter. So I'm going to give you a deep transmission, like a lightning bolt. And I'm also interested in you and this group. The ISTA Wild Love Festival is this, it's this global experiment, and it really is a laboratory. And my understanding is that 75% of the participants are new to ISTA. And so I want to hear from you up front. Normally I hold the questions until after, but what I'm going to do is introduce myself, introduce the topic, and then I'm going to invite you on the subject of intermarriage, be the beloved, what questions do you have? So if you came with a question, or if at any point, go ahead and type it into the chat so Sharon can read that. And we might open it up. Also, if you're willing to be on camera, you can say so and we can spotlight you for those, you know, on the replay, because this video is going to be shared with the rest of the festival. What's wonderful about being part of the festival is that it's happening across all the different time zones. I'm in San Diego, Sharon's in Thailand. You know, I don't know where you're from, but I know that half of the world is sleeping right now. And when they wake up, a lot of them are eager to see the replays of various videos, just as you are in seeing the ones that are not happening during your time zone. All right, so quick show of hands of those who went to the opening ceremony. Awesome, excellent. So you're already initiated into the field, and those of you who haven't, welcome, welcome. I'm KamalaDevi. I'm a lead faculty member for the International School of Temple Arts, but also I'm a mama. I have a 13-year-old who's playing video games in the other room. I'm an author. These are some of my books. I'm very proud of that. I'm also an artist, an activist, have a reality TV show, and all of those things, including my parenting, are around this calling, you know, this thing that's bigger than me and all my creations. And that's towards awakening the wholeness, you know, within myself, within my son, within my, you know, within each of you. I mean, we're all part of, you know, and when I say part, I mean partial perspectives of the whole. And we can't attain wholeness unless we do the shadow work, right? Because we live in this dualistic reality. 3D reality has duality. So there's the light and there's a shadow to everything. And in relative reality, you know, unless we get into the absolute realm, but in the relative, a lot of the shadow work is looking at what are the non-dominant qualities. If I'm a yes to this, automatically I'm a no to what, you know, and sometimes in that shadow, most of the time, there's a lot of power. There's a lot of power in knowing what the shadow is, as opposed to just being, you know, a partial perspective on the planet. And so, you know, healing or wholeness, moving towards healing, is an embracing of the whole. And the intermarriage is this powerful spiritual directive. It's really it's more than a practice. It's a way of being that embraces opposites. You know, it brings together, it marries and merges polarity. So many people know the intermarriage as, you know, we have a non-dominant gender or sexuality. Those of us who were born into female bodies have an inner masculine. Those of us who were born into masculine bodies have an inner feminine. And of course, there's more than just being born into masculine or feminine bodies. There's, you know, many hermaphroditic combinations. But in order to talk about the intermarriage, I want to say we have to be a bit binary, and it's not by prejudice, but more by, like, this is the state of our culture. This is the state of our language. You know, even if we have a non-binary perspective, we're encased in our culture. And so I want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer, as I am gender transcendent, and I go by they, them as my pronouns. And that way of being in the world, we are still developing language for. So throughout today's teachings, you're gonna, you know, I'm gonna talk about feminine and masculine, and sometimes we get that interchanged with woman and man, which is different. Male, female is the biological, distinction based on your X and Y chromosome. Woman and man has more to do with identity. Male, masculine and feminine has more to do with energies, meaning the primordial principle of the yin and the yang on the planet. So there's, subtle distinctions between these two polarities, but what we're moving towards is wholeness. And by wholeness, I really mean the integrated, yin and yang. And we will, and I'm more than happy to talk more about trans theory. So more than just trans identity, more than, transgender politics. There is a gender transcendence that I want to evoke and speak into throughout this course. So the introduction that hopefully will inspire questions from you is that the inner marriage is really the end goal journey, that the journey of the spiritual, sexual, shamanic week-long level 1 training is designed around. So ISTA has multiple initiatory weeks to activate and awaken, your full potential. And the first experience is actually a journey towards the inner marriage. So in a sense, this course right now is just to introduce this concept of I'm pointing in the direction of a practice that's actually an entire life's journey. So the first week's experience is all culminating towards the inner marriage. And what we're wanting to do is to give you a taste of what the state of the relationship is between your inner opposite, and your dominant self. What is that relationship? Because sometimes it's like they're not getting along well. Sometimes it's like, oh, they're just meeting. Sometimes it's like they're getting to know each other. There's a whole journey. And it could be like, hey, we had a falling out and now we're having a reconciliation. So it's an ongoing, marriage is not, oh, you are married and that's it. I can tell you as a sex and relationship coach who's coached thousands of couples, marriage takes work, and it takes ongoing, deep self-awareness, shadow stalking, truth telling, and any relationship takes deep work. And so this is pointing in that direction. So then I do want to hear from you in terms of what questions you have, about masculine, feminine, inner marriage, anything that has that falls under the umbrella of being the beloved. And this, I promise, this is one of those side effects, the benefit of doing this work is that once we start to integrate and really marry our own inner masculine and feminine, and the more acquainted we get with the inner opposite, the more satisfaction and richness and fulfillment we have in our outer relationships as well, right? Because it's basically not just left, right, masculine, feminine, but it's inside, outside. Now marrying inside to the outside, we are creating and manifesting similar vibration. And so when we know the inner opposite, we actually come into a sweet communion with the outer opposite. And it doesn't matter what gender they are. It's just your partnerships can take on more dimensions. So with that promise and that introduction, I'd love to hear some initial questions so I can get a read of where you're at and what you're wanting to talk about during this session. So you're welcome, if you're happy to be on camera, you're welcome to raise your hand. I'm going to start with Sharon, and she's going to read some questions that we have already, but I'm also happy to have you speak directly.
So there is one question. Marrying yourself is hard enough. Marrying yourself when you have a deep father wound is really hard. How do we address the inner marriage from this perspective?
Beautiful. Okay, good. So I'm happy to speak into father wound, mother wound as well, and how that imprints us. Hands up for other questions.
There's another one from the chat, and then we can let other
people. Great, go ahead and put yourself on spotlight.
I don't understand why marriage. Can't we just work on the feminine and masculine? Why does they have to be a marriage? Good.
You know, I asked myself the same question for many years actually on this path. So I'm glad that somebody else is on the same page. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have another question. I'd like to take at least 5.
Amanda.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this isn't a question exactly, but in terms of my inner masculine and my inner feminine, if you imagine it as a piano keyboard, I'm really comfortable with the middle of the keyboard, and the very masculine edge and the very feminine edge are hard for me. So I guess I just want to hear your comments on that.
Excellent. That's a beautiful illustration, Amanda. Thank you. Yeah, I'll share more. Let's see a show of hands, or who else?
Shaya.
Hello. I wanted to ask, my inner feminine is super, like, she's a goddess, but my inner masculine is like 15 years old. And like my feminine is like, this man, with this man you want me to marry?
Thank you, Shaya, for your honesty. That's beautiful and very common. So you're not alone. I'll speak into that after we take one more question.
There are more questions in the chat. I can read.
Great. Go ahead.
Can you share healthy feminine and healthy masculine, and then unhealthy feminine and unhealthy masculine?
Yes.
How can we unify both polarities inside of us?
Mm-hmm.
Can I cause damage to myself doing this marriage in a wrong way?
Mm-hmm.
After healing, how can we make it evolve into something new if we don't have another healthy model to create from? And what is the inner versus outer really mean? Does it truly exist? How can I tell the age of my masculine and feminine?
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly fascinated by the act of creating this inner union, how to bring them into this dance. I can feel so well the polarities, but the union, how to, is still a bit of a challenge.
Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to ask you, Sharon, to just collect, if more questions come in, collect them for later. but I think this is a wonderful start because it gives me some clay to work with, to put on, it's kind of like putting the clay on the wheel, and we can start to shape that a bit before we get into exercise. So we are, say again?
I found another one that I missed before.
Okay.
I'd love your perspective on the inner marriage with the hormone taking trans population.
Okay, great. So let's start there. And my question to the group, and we're going to keep the spotlight on me, so I want you to feel comfortable with the anonymity of this. I would love to see, gosh, we have 3 pages. So I would love to see who in the group identifies in the queer or trans or non-binary spectrum. So I'm going to paint the biggest, widest umbrella, right? And it's like, if you identify as queer, trans, non-binary, so let's even widen it by saying that your gender is not cis. Okay, so cisgender means that you were born into the biological sex that's congruent with your identity. So if you're a woman, you were born into a female body, and that's your cisgender, and that's comfortable for you. But if you're gender fluid or gender queer in any way, I would love for you to this is one of those safe places where we get to see who is representing, who's in community. And maybe some of you are gender queer questioning, and you don't have a space where you get to come out or talk about this. And I want to give permission to that right now. The way we're going to do this is we're going to invite everyone who is cis, like if you're cisgendered, to actually turn off your camera. And that means that those of us who are non-binary, trans, and gender queer or anything in that will actually stay on. It's just temporary. It's just for a show, like in show of hands. So you're gonna keep your camera on if you're gender queer. Otherwise, go ahead and turn your video, just hit stop video for a moment. And that should show us who identifies as trans, or maybe people here who are on hormones and or doing it naturally. But at this point, you've stopped your video if you're cis, and the others who are on, we get to like look around and wave to each other, and you can see like who's celebrating, representing non-normative gender. Yay. You can really celebrate that. Wonderful. There's a couple of people whose ceilings we're looking at, so I'm imagining that they may not be representing, but that's okay. Thank you. Like, look around and take a few breaths and really, celebrate the diversity of who's remaining, like the diversity of like, wow, it really looks and feels, there's no stereotype here. There's no norm here. Beautiful. Okay, so you can turn your cameras back on so we can, see the group again. And oh, by the way, wait, no, don't do that yet. Keep your cameras off. I am curious if anyone is on hormones and or, and anyone who's trans who's also changing their body through hormones or surgery. So I'm going to turn my camera off because I'm not, but I'm curious who else is. If there's anyone who's doing transgender hormone therapy or surgery and wants to represent, I really want to see and celebrate that. Beautiful, beautiful. So again, let's celebrate and acknowledge, that we have trans folk here, and that's so beautiful to be in this conversation of intermarriage. Okay, now everybody can come back on. And if we had more time, I would actually ask, okay, well, who's non-binary and who's genderqueer and what's, various definitions. But what we're talking about is gender. So we're not talking about, your sexual orientation. I want to make a big distinction right here for everybody, which is that there's gender and then there's gender expression, which is, by the way, when I asked who's trans and doing hormones, they're changing their expression, their outward expression. And there can be some people who are very trans but don't change their outward appearance at all, because it's like, this is my gender, I know my gender, and I don't necessarily express. And I'll give you the example. I, as gender transcendent, have a very strong masculine and feminine, but I don't present masculine. I don't express masculine, other than occasionally, doing drag or playful or doing this, but that's not my outward expression. That doesn't mean I'm less masculine. And it's really important in a culture that is so appearance based, that when our center of gravity is in soul, from the soul perspective, it's the greater non-physical self, not the physical self. And it's a beautiful thing that we now live in a time and culture in which we can, through hormones and surgery, people, have access to altering their body in a way that makes it congruent with their inner sense of self. I mean, that's fucking magical, if you ask me. And people have lots of opinions. It can be controversial, and it has its risks and its shadows, but it is really really a unique time in history, because there's, trans people throughout human evolution have never been at this point when the surgeries have been and the hormones have been so well researched and developed, and that you can have a full transition. So the question was about intermarriage and the trans population. And I want to say that
could you before explain what does gender transcendent mean, the term you used?
Yeah, so on the non-binary, genderqueer, under that umbrella, there's different identities and titles, and some people feel, and it's really important to point this out. Okay, and actually I'm going to take the comment that was made about the piano. Amanda, thank you for that. I think that's a gorgeous analogy. All right, so if we have this piano, and let's just say, this is very, very, stereotypical, that the is the feminine energy and the da-da-da-da is the masculine energy. Okay, so let's say this keyboard has like all of this. So if in gender, like not just expression, but gender identity, some people feel in the non-binary spectrum, like, hey, I wake up and some days I feel like this and I'll dress like this and I'll play like this, and then another day it'll be like like I'm dressing like a man and I'm packing, and then and it goes back and forth from day to day or from month to month, or it's really fluid, right? For some people. For some people, and Amanda was a beautiful example of like, hey, it feels like it's really here in the center. It's like, I feel that I'm both, but I'm not the far extreme. I'm not super feminine, I'm not super masculine. Like this is actually typically called more androgynous, okay? Then trans is often, hey, I was born into this body, but I'm shifting into, this is how I see myself, and this is how I want to present, or shifting my body, right? And it could be born here, shift here, but there's a trans. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it also answers the question. There are some trans people, and I happen to be dating a trans woman who's also, has a lot of the typical programming, as a father who's responsible for taking care of her kids, and then now, now gets to play with fashion and do the feminine thing. Like, one could go to the other extreme and not have intermarriage. Okay, so intermarriage doesn't have to mean, ooh, I have both extremes. You don't have to. It can just be, I'm in deep relationship with my inner masculine and feminine, and I'm listening to both, and they're both guiding my life. I'm not disowning or ignoring this non-dominant and very powerful part of myself, right? So it is possible in the trans community to have a trans woman who's completely in denial of, like, I've actually been in trans circles where the women are man-hating, and they're like, men are pigs and this and that. It's like part of the reason they turned trans is so that they could get away from the male population, and that's not a healthy intermarriage. So just because you're trans does not mean you've got a healthy intermarriage. There's also a lot of people in the trans population who are more integrated because they've lived both the light and the shadow of both. So I'm not gonna I'm not gonna reinforce the stereotype that people are trans because they've been wounded by a certain gender and they're deciding to abandon that gender. It's usually more coming from a place of knowing oneself and being willing to be who you are despite social pressures and despite the outward prescriptions, that it comes from a sense of so I will say my stereotype or my observation in my experience is that most trans people know themselves more than cis people. In general, they tend to have to go through more like, well, I really know who I am regardless of people pleasing or what others think. So it's not about appearances, it's about encountering the soul. All right, so we've spoken into some of the some of these questions, but I really want to frame this as a journey that's valuable for the evolution of every human being, regardless of your gender identity, regardless of your expression, regardless of your sexuality. In order to be a whole human, and by that I mean like to get the most out of life, it's not just a marriage of masculine and feminine, but also marriage of spirit and form, matter. So big part of this journey is learning, to bring spirit into the flesh, into the experience. So I'm going to invite us back into the body, stretching and moving, as we feel into this big question about healthy and immature versus mature and unhealthy. And I want to tell a little story that may be uncomfortably familiar to you. It's kind of mythopoetic. We come into the world first from the realm of the greater non-physical realm or source energy. And regardless of what your cosmology is, I invite you to consider that there's a spark of infinite intelligence that's a unique, concentrated spark of being that's really unique, that's like no other in the world. And it comes into flesh and form through the combination of the sperm and the egg that come together, right? So that sperm and egg is like a portal of the entire lineage of your mother and your father. And whether they're, you know, of their biological mother and father and all of their genetic inheritance, and it comes into form and it begins to develop. And there is a point, there's a pre-phase in which it's not gendered, right? It's developing. And I remember very distinctly being pregnant and not knowing, you know, that question, is it a boy, is it a girl? It's like, I don't know. I know there's life happening inside of me. And the first time I went to the doctor to find out what it was, my little baby was straddling the umbilical cord. And so we couldn't see the genitals because they actually say babies self-pleasure inside the belly. And the baby was wrapping its legs around the umbilical cord, which supposedly feels good to the fetus. So it's like, I don't know. The second time I went in and they got a shot and they said, it's a boy. Then I was like, I have a penis. I finally have a penis. There was a penis inside of my belly. And I had so much fun as a woman having a penis in my body all the time. And I'm sharing this because that distinction, does it have a penis? Does it have a vagina? Becomes the male female, right? Like, of course, there's the genetics, but that's the moment at which it gets declared. And then the enculturation begins. The messages start. Now, our parents, whether biological or not, the guardians start to impose their beliefs, their ideas, their thoughts onto us. And in addition to them telling us what it means to be a man, you know, boys don't cry, and what it means to be a girl, they don't climb trees and skateboard, or whatever it is that those messages are. Beyond the messages, we look at our mothers and our fathers and we think, that's the god, the goddess. Like, that imperfect human who's doing the best they can is imprinting on us as the ultimate masculine or feminine. And this is all pre-rational. You know, this is before we even have like the intellectual discernment. So these are our impressions. And then someone brought up this question of, you know, a father wound. Like, what happens when the dad is absent or abusive, right? So what does that tell us about the masculine? You know, he's dangerous. You know, there's no safety, or it's the people that I love are the ones that hurt me the most. You know, these are the kinds of impressions that we get. You know, what happens when we have an over-domineering mother, or a mother that smothers us too much and is always concerned and worried, and you know, the feminine is fragile, or the feminine is, you know, is controlling or smothering. Like, these are the kinds of impressions that we get just from our parents being imperfect humans. And then, you know, we come out into the world as we mature, all kinds of fucked up messages about dating, like all kinds of game playing, and, you know, here's who you need to be in order to like attract a man, and here's who you need to be in order to be a, you know, stud. And so we get messages through that phase. And then we look at school and church and state, and God forbid we look at our politicians, and we look at leadership, and we say, what is, you know, masculine and feminine healthy models? And so this is where, when someone said, you know, like, we are here, you know, we are gathering as part of the collective that wants to awaken from the collective nightmare and to dream up a new dream, you know, of healthy masculine and feminine. But how do we do that when that's not modeled to us on television and Disney, and, you know, it's not being shown to us in various media forms, including and especially the government? So, and I don't want to speak for all government. I know that we have some beautiful leadership. I just happen to be a little damaged in that area, being that I am in America. And yeah, and currently, I'm going to take a side note. This is a little non-political tangent. Part of shadow work, part of this inquiry that we're doing about what the work that we do inside will represent what we attract on the outside. okay, is to look at, for example, the soul of America and the leadership and the governance of America. And instead of, you know, all the Trump hating that I could easily regress into, to actually say this man and this cabinet and these leaders represent the wounding of the soul of America, of which I'm a part. So there's a responsibility in the collective to say, hey, this is a fractured country. This is a country that is violently split into left and right. And the product of that division is now playing out, you know, in governance. And that, you know, is a reflection of an outer reflection of the inner, the heart of what's happening in America. And so, as sad as it is to talk about, it is important to say, like, that's what shadow work looks like at the collective level. And so, you know, the answer around, you know, what are healthy models and how do we download them when they don't currently exist is like, we have to be the change. And in order to do that, there's a permission to be imperfect, you know, to know that evolution is a work in progress, that we're all doing the best we can. And that instead of deconstructing and bashing the masculine or bashing the feminine or bashing, you know, the integration of both, it's more like, okay, well, what is the light sides? What are the healthy qualities and how do I grow towards them? So a big important distinction that we're making here, instead of saying healthy and unhealthy, it's more appropriate to say that we are all in varying degrees of maturity and we're maturing. And part of the unhealthy is just unaware or even ignorant. And then when we get more information and more wisdom and more experience, then it's more mature. And so we collectively, you know, can take a moment to see that we know what it is to be immature in the masculine, right? And we have a lot of models of that. And so let's take a moment, and we have got you all on mute right now. I don't know if it's easy to unmute everybody, and I just want to have like a shower of is that possible, Sharon, to unmute everyone? It's going to get loud here for a moment, and it'll just be a moment. But is it easy to do that?
I gave them the option. Now everyone can unmute themselves and
perfect. So now I'm going to invite you to generate unhealthy masculine qualities. So let's just shout it out. What are some of the unhealthy masculine qualities?
Controlling.
Stealing.
I'm better. I'm the best. I'm God.
Control.
I am fantastic. I win.
Just follow me.
I am the winner.
Overpowering.
I am the king. You will obey my instructions.
Misuse
You will
of power.
obey me.
You are my
I am the boss. Fuck you.
you are owing.
Fuck you.
Taking
domination.
Good.
My anger rules.
Thank you. So we're
I love the
going to
growls.
pause there. Sharon can take off the mute for a moment. And so what we felt in that shower was a lot of the aggression, competition, power over. There's a, you know, like a rah, like this immature show of power and abuse. And in that, you know, which is you know, developmentally appropriate when someone's figuring out their power, but we want our head of households and leaders to come into more of a consideration, you know, and a cooperation. And some of the more healthy qualities of the masculine are to actually hold space, you know, to listen, to be present, and to see what are the needs of the whole. You know, we want leaders who are, and I love this word, omni-considerate. So they're considering, what do the women need? What do the children need? What do the schools need? What, you know, what is needed here for protection of the state? What is, you know, and it's consideration that is not just in the moment, but ideally big picture, farsighted, farther out the implications, and responsible. And so those are some of the healthy masculine, is holding space, you know, providing safety, and, you know, listening without judgment. And so let's take a moment and do this a little bit more responsibly, which is like, you know, it's easy to look at Donald Trump and say, or here's these qualities, but it's not shadow work unless you look inside of yourself and you go, oh, I feel in me where there's those unhealthy qualities or those immature qualities. And I feel in me where I do have sparks or sense of healthy, you know, listening skills or this or that. So take it home, you know, bring this home, and then go ahead and shake it off for a moment. Shake off all the masculine, like, whew. And it's not just shaking it off, it's integrating it, right? So you're like giving it a good resequencing, and it's bringing home all the positive masculine, and then coming to center and tuning in to the feminine. And that's the feminine outside, the feminine inside. On her journey, what are some of the immature, unhealthy feminine qualities? Sharon, if you would allow people to unmute themselves, let's have it. Everybody unmute and
lying.
Feel it good, and feel it from within yourself.
Overly
Good.
emotional.
I'm the center of attention.
Manipulation.
Passive aggressive.
Queen.
Jealousy.
My way.
Talking behind the back.
Manipulating and
Using sex for getting power.
oh my gosh, yes.
Controlling.
Submissive.
Unfair.
Weak.
Overprotective.
Okay, I was starting to feel bad. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Cruel.
No. There's also
Whining.
Okay.
boundaryless.
Sad.
Victimhood.
Incompetent.
I'll defer to the man's opinion.
Self-protective.
Okay. So we're gonna pause
And then
here.
sacrificing.
Thank you. And I just want to have you notice what's happening in your body. Like notice the somatically, what's tingling, what's vibrating, what's happening. And yeah, and you want to kind of shake and vibrate through, like, this is happening inside our immature feminine, this is happening in the world. And what a lot of what we heard was this over emotional, over controlling or protective or reactive, or that she is, you know, and sometimes can be petty and backstabbing, and again, also a different kind of manipulative competition, right? So these are some of the qualities that we heard in various flavors. And then I want you to just feel the gift of the feminine, you know, and there's these divine feminine qualities. If you can look at the people you admire, you can look within, and the healthy feminine does have a lot of emotional energy, and that's a powerful energy that's radiant. You know, she radiates. She also is connected to the moon and the mysteries. So she has a sense of cycle and life, and she's creative, right? Like she's life-giving. And so the feminine, although a lot of times there's judgment on how unpredictable she can be, but she also has this mystery to her. And those are some of the, you know, some of the more mature qualities, is that she can be with the unknown, and she can, you know, create life and be nurturing and generous and fertile. So go ahead and embrace that. Do whatever shaking and movement where you can find in your own body where that lives and what we're giving space to. And the key, you know, with all shadow work in the intermarriage process is not to disown, oh, that immature little girl, or oh, that tyrannical masculine. I don't want that. That then gets pushed into your own shadow. And what we repress, you know, like what we push away will run us. It'll actually start to express itself sideways. So instead of pushing it away, we want to embrace it. We want to own it. We want to listen to it and get that, hey, we all have these immature qualities and we're going to nurture them and help them grow up to mature instead of cut them off and shame them, which then only feeds the demon and makes it stronger. So this intermarriage is, and the word marriage is really more like an embracing and a coming together of, you know, one of the questions that came up here is, you know, is why marriage? Why can't I just work on it? And if, you know, ultimately this is a shamanic practice that's in the subjective inner realms, you know, we're not big part of shamanic work is staying true to what's value aligned for you and knowing that you've got an inner sovereign compass. So I might prescribe an intermarriage ritual and you might say, that doesn't work for my ideology. This would be more powerful, you know, and it's like, beautiful. I invite you to use your inner knowing, but the distinction and, you know, the distinction between, you know, I'm working on this and I'm doing a marriage is that a marriage can often be a ritual and a ceremony. So when we do rituals or ceremonies, as we do in the, you know, an intermarriage ceremony in the level 1, or you could take this to heart and do it, you know, yourself. We start to transcend the ordinary and we move into the realms of the sacred. So taking sacred vows, when you come together with a beloved, it's not just the two, you know, there's either the officiant or even just the two under the holy third. In the witnessing of the tribe, you know, the coming together of community to actually bless and honor that, we then have, you know, the support or the cauldron for this kind of alchemical coming together. And so the marriage, the difference, you know, I can work on my masculine, I can work on my feminine, but in the marriage, there's my masculine and my feminine have a synergy where the marriage is more than them individually. So the way the masculine and the feminine interact within me is more than if I was just two. And that is what the symbology of the marriage is. It brings in the holy third, which is the we space. And so I went through years. I mean, I'm almost 20 years in my current marriage with Michael. 7 of those years was absolute rejection of marriage, partly because I spent 7 years as, you know, lesbian identified, and gay marriage was not allowed at the time. And I was like, I'm not going to engage in my heterosexual privilege and get married. And, you know, so I was just rejection of marriage. And then we did this ceremony because gay marriage was allowed. It was that year. We're like, okay, I'm ready for marriage. We did what we called a 7-year itch ceremony. I didn't even use the word marriage, but it was a ceremony. And it was a sacred ceremony in which we invoked our community, and we also invoked, you know, our inner opposites, and we got married in essence, we're now married to love itself. But in that union, there is a sense of bringing two together to create something more than two could be alone. And so, you know, today we're gonna untangle and work with the polarities, because it is valuable to just work on the feminine, to work on the masculine. And for those of you who are like, hey, I am non-binary, I don't like separating into that binary, you can change the exercise as you see fit. So I give you kind of permission to get creative with it. Or you can say, all right, I don't like the binary, but we live in a binary world, and for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to do this to see what value is in it. Okay, so it's up to you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into breakout rooms with two people. So you'll be partnered with somebody else. And in this dialogue, what's super important is you're not there to be politically correct. You're not there to impress the other person. You're just using this total stranger as a mirror for you to look deeper into your own self, okay? And what you're going to look at is beliefs about the masculine and the feminine. And we're going to do this in simple Freudian style, right? Which is, so actually, I'm going to give you this exercise and we're going to do something else because I just got a download. I want you to do this, you know, whether you're journaling or with a partner. This is one way that you can excavate and further your deep understanding of your beliefs, okay? Which is, men are blank. Men are blank. Men are blank. And so that 10 times you say that and you kind of look at what comes up for you, because these are your beliefs, right? So it might be that you're like, oh, men are pigs, men are strong, men are handsome, men are, you know, but that process of asking yourself and just answering like this is really, really valuable. And then swapping over and saying, you know, women are, because it might be that they're fragile. It might be that they're, you know, alluring. It might be what is there for you. So I'm going to invite you to do that as a practice, kind of a homework. And even though it sounds very rudimentary, it's like, oh, I know my beliefs. Doing it in rapid succession and doing it multiple times in repetition will kind of excavate and take you deeper and deeper. And then there's a imminent, like it's imperative that you own, like whatever you're seeing in the outer world, like that's actually what's playing out in the inner world. Okay, somebody asked about, you know, this inner and outer, and it really is shamanic to have a foot in both worlds. Now, what that means, the definition, you know, of a shaman, self-made madman, is to be straddling realms. So you're in the 3D world, which has its culture, has its beliefs, and then you're also in, you know, the dream time, the realm of ideas and the inner subjective versus the outer objective. So I want to invite you to do that practice. But now that I'm upgrading what we're about to do when we go into 2 rooms, I'd love for you to actually excavate your unique inner opposite. Okay, so we're gonna have time to do one side. You know, if you want at home after this, your homework is your second homework, right? So first you've got this writing exercise of men are and women are. Second homework exercise is to do the second gender, right? But right today you choose one gender. So if I'm in a female body, I would choose the masculine. And let's say that Sharon is my partner and we've gone out into a breakout room and we're going to have 10 minutes. We're going to self-time, so I'll have 5 and she'll have 5. And during that 5 minutes, I'm going to, and I want to check for understanding. I'm actually going to cover one eye. Now, if I want to access the masculine, I want to access the left brain, which is more the logical and the rational and the analytical brain. Okay, so I'm actually going to cover, this gets a little bit confusing, and that's why I'm going to check for understanding, the right side, which goes to the left brain, and I'm going to talk about my inner masculine. Okay, so I would love right now to check for understanding. If you're wanting to access, you choose, if you want to access your masculine for this exercise, cover your right eye. Go ahead and cover it now so I can see that everyone understands. Okay, so this is if you're accessing your masculine, you're covering your right eye. Good. And then if you're going to choose to cover, to access your feminine, cover your left eye. And so go ahead and cover the eye that you're going to choose so you're clear. Because the left, by covering the left eye, you access the right brain, and the right brain is creative and nonlinear and transrational. And so you want to speak from that place. It's almost like you're covering that eye and you're going into the inner eye and you're seeing. Now, what the speaking looks like is, Sharon, I'm gonna use you as an example for a moment. I'm talking to you directly. I'm covering my right eye and speaking about my inner masculine. And I'm going to tell you, and these are the things that you want to kind of talk to your partner about, right? I'm going to share with you, you know, what he looks like or feels like, how he dresses, what he thinks. And so what you want to describe, and Sharon, you might even ask me questions about him, right? And it's like, what does he do for work? Or what does he, what are his hobbies? Or what kind of a lover is he? Or, you know, what does he say right now? Okay, so these are some of what you're going to share. And by the way, there's no way to do it wrong, but I'm going to tune in and I'm going to say, you know, Salvador is an elder and he's a tribesman and he is deeply, deeply devoted to the feminine. And he's also, you know, an academic, sometimes too much so, but he loves like poetry and reading. And, you know, and I'm just going to tell you, and it doesn't have to make sense, but I'm going to share with you what comes through when I tap into, and it's kind of like channeling the inner opposite. And you've got a witness. Sharon would be just open-heartedly accepting whatever wants to come through. So this is your practice. You're going to have 5 minutes each. Sharon, would you tell them when it's, you know, time to switch? So 5 minutes, and then she'll write time to switch, and then you'll switch sides, which means the other partner will do the other 5 minutes. And then we're going to come back and harvest. Any questions?
I had a question. Great. Yeah, I'm the one who asked about the inner and the outer because I still get stuck on that. So if you're talking about the inner masculine, you're talking about your concept for yourself. And is an outer masculine someone who you would actually have a relationship with in the world? Like, what's the distinction between, are you saying there's an inner masculine and an outer masculine?
Yeah, thank you. So when I make the distinction of inner and outer, I'm speaking of the subjective inner realms versus anything that's manifested in the three-dimensional outer realm. And that could be the way I outwardly express, or it could be who I'm attracted to, or it could be anything that could be captured by a video camera. Like a video camera cannot capture my dreams, but it can capture you know, what's happening outside. So I would, you know, kind of let go of that concept for the sake of this exercise. And I would deeply say, what arises for me when I cover my eye and I allow myself to just dream and vision and channel. So we're definitely just speaking our stream of consciousness. Good. And then when we come back, I can talk more about how this will affect the outer world. But let's do the exercise first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Sharon is going to start to put us into rooms. And if you want to go into the room, you just accept, it'll say breakout room. You accept the invitation. And then if you don't mind, you know, watch your phone to make sure you've got 5 minutes. Sharon, go ahead and turn off the recording now.
Yeah. So I'm creating the rooms.
So welcome back. We also gathered a few really late comers since there's another workshop ending, so welcome. We are going to harvest from this exercise, and the, you know, my preferred harvest, you're welcome to write, if you don't want to be seen on camera, to write in the chat the most, you know, what it is that you learned about yourself in this brief inquiry. And maybe you learned something by reflection of your partner. Maybe you learned something in the meditation. But those of you who did have a powerful experience, you know, and it's okay. Like some of you might be like, yeah, not much. I've done this work. Or some people might be like, I don't like the binary. You know, I heard that, but I want to hear from those who had a powerful experience and an insight and learn something about yourself. So let's see a show of hands of those who are willing to be seen on camera to share. And then after that, Sharon can maybe read if there's some harvests in the chat room. So who learned something about yourself? I see Miri, and then I see Amanda. Hold on, I'm going to see if there's one more. And there's also Roshanara. All right, Miri.
Hi. Wow, that was really, really powerful. I kind of just dove into a story and it was pretty amazing because all of a sudden I had this character of this guy over 50 who works in a bank and walks in a suit, and he's fat and he doesn't really treat his wife very well, and actually his dream is to drop all of this off and go surfing. And it was funny because I kind of recognized some qualities of my father, but I also recognized some things that I've experienced on myself in the past, like some of my traits. And it was really surprising. I don't really know what this means quite yet, but yeah, I was just surprised that I had all of this story in my head about him.
Beautiful, Mary. Yeah, it is a portal if we allow ourselves to have a waking dream and get information from the sub and super consciousness. So thank you. And then next, Amanda.
All right. So the first thing that came to me is I realized I decided to explore my masculine side because I've spent so much time exploring my feminine side. And the first thing that came to me is I am more comfortable making love from my feminine side. My masculine side, there's this big fear that I will be abusive or I'll hurt somebody. And so that was the first big insight. I think the second one is that I had a sense that my masculine side has a fragile ego because it's gotten a lot of criticism. And so it really has this deep need for appreciation for its gifts, which are considerable, but there's always this fear of making a mistake, of my power being overwhelming, that I almost hold myself back because I'm afraid of having somebody criticize me. I think those were the biggest insights. Thank you.
They are very big insights. Thank you for sharing. And then the third hand I saw was Rush. Where are you?
Here I am.
How do I say your name?
Roshanara.
Roshanara. Tell us
Rosh
your
is fine. Thank you
Great.
so much for the program. I feel like this is beautiful and teaching so much.
And what did you learn about yourself? Oh, I can't hear you. So Rosh, I lost your sound. Maybe we'll come back to you if we get.
Is it working now?
There it is. You're back. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm not sure when it got disconnected. Yeah, so I said thank you so much for hosting this program. I feel like it's brought a lot of clarity. One of the biggest, it was just amazing for me how, you know, the information just kept flowing without any thought process really being involved. A lot of the time in my life, it's always been the feminine showing up. So I feel like I've got a very strong feminine side to myself, and really how the masculine's a little boy who's afraid to come out and play, who's afraid to be seen, who doesn't really feel safe enough to show up for himself, so no one and nothing can show up for him because he doesn't show up for himself. And also how he has this need to protect and be financially able for himself, but hasn't really even seen himself up until this point. So it's beautiful because now that he's had the strength to show himself, now the feminine can come out and be there for himself, and they can like figure things out.
There's an alliance there.
There is. The feminine will support the masculine because the masculine's now aware that he needs the support.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you.
Great. So I see that there's 2 more hands raised, and then there's questions in the chat. And I'm also looking at the time because we have some questions that were raised, and I really want to bring this full circle. I'm going to pause here. I'm not going to take more feedback. So you're welcome to write it in the chat, which I will be sure to save and read later. And also, if you want to stay in touch with me, I invite you actually at this point to put your email address, your name and email address in the chat so that we can stay in touch. I'm actually wanting to offer everyone in this class a follow-up. I have a chapter of my book. So one of my books, this book, Sacred Sexual Healing, has a whole chapter on the masculine and the feminine. It's called The God Goddess Within, and it's you know, the basis of the work that we're doing in this class, and it's actually also the text on which the spiritual sexual shamanic experience in ISTA was founded. So you know, I co-authored this with Baba Des. So put your email address and I can save that and get back to you with the book chapter and other goodies, other free resources. Okay, so what we heard in this harvest was a number of things. And I want to thread that together. Can you put the pin back on me? Sharon, I'm not sure if my video, I pinned it on my side. Okay, thank you. So we hear from people in the chat around, wow, when I look into my inner masculine, all I see is my father and you know, details about my father. For others, it's like, ooh, this feels like my ex-husband and these qualities. For others, like the first share, it's like, where did this come from? It's surprising new information, and it is something I didn't know that I was holding in my sub or super consciousness. And then even in Amanda's share, you know, like, oh, in sexuality, I can see my masculine, you know, as a penetrator, like I don't want him to be abusive. And so what I invite us to look at is our own timeline. So a lot of the, you know, shamanic healing happens in timelines. Now, if you're a believer of the multiverse, it's like we are converging right now as souls in these bodies, in this time, in this space, and through technology, we're all gathering like right now. And, you know, there's the simultaneous multiple realms of all of our dream time, all of our pasts, all of our future imaginings, like happening simultaneously in, you know, in the now. And so much of what it means to do shamanic healing and soul retrieval is to go back to time travel, to go back and to look in our own timelines at the places where we got stuck, where there were imprints, where there were pain points. Somebody at the beginning of the call asked about, hey, their father wound, you know, and some of us have like deep traumatic episodes throughout our history in which some part of our soul, either our, you know, feminine soul, masculine soul, some part of our being left the body. It wasn't safe to be here. It's not safe to be like my mom because she, you know, emotionally abused me or whatever it is. It's like, I don't want to be like them. So then we form either identity or coping strategies or around being like a parent, being the opposite of parent, being like somebody who raped us or did it, you know, like these traumatic episodes. And those moments in our history are forming us like consciously or subconsciously. And to be free, to be sexually liberated, is to not be run, you know, unconsciously by this past. So we want to take back our power and be at choice about our full like gender expression. And part of awakening in the dream and creating a new culture with healthy feminine and masculine qualities is to say, I'm going to go back and love those stuck, broken parts of me into maturity. And as much as many of us want to be like, I'm going to do this transformative right now, you know, transformation and healing, one of the things that we have to embrace is that the true healing happens, like maybe you conceptually get it, but it has to happen at the somatic level as well as in the heart. Like there's lots and lots of different levels. And I invite you to, I got a little distracted by the chat, so I'm turning that off. I invite you to do this soul reclamation. Now, this is very much the journey that we do in level 1. And sometimes it's inner parenting with our inner little boy or inner little girl. And it's not hurry up, grow up, or transform, or become a divine goddess or god. It's more like, how do I embrace my wounding, love that shadow, and also stretch and access the higher aspects of the inner opposite. So I have, you know, here, this gorgeous deity from the Hindu canon who, you know, represents, and I'm basically looking at the back of a postcard because it's the best of the masculine and feminine qualities integrated in one. You know, so we have the Shiva and Parvati together. And what we're doing is we're aspiring, you know, towards our highest version of feminine and masculine, but we're not disowning the trauma or the shadow. We're just embracing that. So somebody asked at the beginning of the class about age, because, you know, now that we're time traveling, it's not chronological, but we can have within us, like when I think of my inner little boy, there's a real sticking point around age 8, because that was the age at which, you know, my brothers were getting boners, and I thought, oh, I wish I had a penis, and how come I'm not like them, and something, I'm broken, and like there's something stuck in my psyche where he feels like he's not validated, he wasn't real. And I know it as a mother, because when my son was going through his age 8 period, I got to reparent my own little boy. I got to relive that in a healthy, conscious way. But we don't have to have kids to redo that. We can reparent ourselves with or without kids through, you know, the therapy and the shamanic journeying, and through our, you know, having safe spaces like this and peer groups to work on it. But it's also important to note that for some people, when they think of their little boy, it's like, ooh, he was hurt at 4, or, you know, I'm really stuck at this 13 point. And it doesn't have to be like, maybe you don't know the age, that's fine. But if you really want to know, you can ask him. You know, you can do a creative visualization where you go in, you talk to him, and you know, coming from your greater non-physical self, from your soul, from your most congruent sense of identity, having a dialogue and doing some aspecting with inner aspects of yourself is also part, you know, can be part of this inner marriage journey. And so there are, I believe, in the festival, other aspecting, you know, workshops where you can learn those tools if you don't already have them. But this is an ongoing, patient discovery process, because we can't tell a 4-year-old to grow up faster. And this is something that in the trans community, you know, a lot of people who are going through hormones, even though, you know, they may be 35 years old, their body might be like, hey, I'm actually hormonally like a 13-year-old right now. And it does take a while for, you know, the testosterone to really balance out, or, you know, to integrate and to actually form the body in a different way, and or redistribute the fat or muscle. And that's one of the most common things in the trans community is like, why can't this go faster? Like, it's so impatient. And the beautiful thing is that the body transforms at its rate, the mind transforms at its rate, the emotional body has its own intelligence, and we are multidimensional beings, and we want to do this marriage all the way up, all the way down, on every dimension, to every degree. And it's not a completion ceremony. We're not looking for a total graduation towards enlightenment. It's more, I'm a work in progress. I'm maturing, you know, at varying rates, and I'm gentle with myself in the process. I'm becoming more self-aware. I'm sharing honestly what I know, and we don't have to hold on to all, you know, that and make a lot of meaning of it. Truly what it means to be sexually free is not just not stuck in your past wounding, but also not stuck in your shame and your guilt and your fear about your sexuality, about your gender. And so the first layer of this work is giving permission, giving voice, giving, like, it's an imperfect process. It's messy, you know, and to just be like, hey, this is a shame-free zone for me to be under construction. And again, your inner masculine and feminine doesn't look like anybody else's. It doesn't have to. There's no comparison of my insides to your outside, which brings us back around. And this is the kind of final note that I want to really end on, is how profoundly this inner work raises our own vibration, contentment, fulfillment, helps to heal old, you know, patterns in such a way that we then get a it's like a lease on our new relationships. So when we, you know, we all know this, we can only love another to the degree we love ourselves. But when we love ourselves, you know, our inner opposites, there's a deeper sense of fulfillment. And the fulfillment is, I have needs of the masculine, and instead of seeking to get that met outside, I start to deeply rest in the masculine that's within. You know, I start to commune with him, let him hold me, let him hear me. And from that place, I show up to a masculine relationship full. You know, or if you're like, you know, fascinated and curious by the feminine, you feel like you're obsessing with her energy out there. It's like turning that around and actually getting more fascinated and curious about the mystery of the feminine within you can bring you more from a more centered place to the outside. And one of the most miraculous and almost ironic and funny things that I observed with people doing this work, now I have a long, you know, track history. I've been doing it for many years, and I'll watch as people mature, they will start attracting more mature partners. You know, partner selection is an enormous function of like your relationship's satisfaction is a function of your partner selection. Who you're selecting is a reflection of your own vibration. And as you mature on the inside, you'll begin to attract appropriate partners for your own, you know, age. And it's like, there's a maturity, there's an experience, there's a wisdom that will come, you know, be just naturally, irresistibly by law of attraction, you know, come into your field. And for those of you, myself included, you know, who are already in long-term committed relationships, and you're like, hey, I have my partner. It's not about the partner selection. That's been selected. Like my partnership is soul ordained. But the more he does his work and the more I do my work, the more our marriage matures. The relationship itself moves away from personality and getting needs met more into, wow, we're meeting in freedom and sharing values. And now we're turning our love more and more to serve the world because we're feeling full. We're not just trying to get from each other, we're wanting for each other. And in wanting for each other, we want for the world. And so our partnership is really on purpose. And we're no longer, you know, spinning on that healing loop, but we're giving back and helping to heal others. And I want that for you, which is, what is the mate or mates that will bring out the best in you? And I promise, you know, that our partners will also bring out the best wounding. Like part of what love does is it brings up its opposite to be healed. So when we're attracted to someone, we're often attracted to the kind of wounding that will trigger the very work that we need to do as well. So better you get at doing your inner work, doing your shadow hunting, the more challenges and reactions and triggers that are brought up in partnership, the better you'll be at actually owning those, eating them, you know, digesting that and growing through it. So that is, you know, really one of the side benefits. I don't like to tell people do your inner marriage work so that you can be a better lover or attract better partners. It's more like when you do this work, you'll feel more content, whole, and then as a side effect, your relationships will be more easeful, more accelerated in their growth and fulfilling. So we are a little past time. I want to, you know, sum up with a little review and an invitation. So, you know, I see that there's hands raised. I will be happy to stay officially after class to answer questions, but I want to make sure that people are available to go to the next session. So the first thing is an invitation. So of the books, you know, the that I've written, this is most relevant to today's journey. So Sacred Sexual Healing is available. All of my books are available on Amazon. So you want to find my Amazon page. You can find all of my resources, by the way, at KamalaDevi.com. And I want to give a special shout out to this book, not just because I have the picture behind me, but that's funny. I haven't promoted this book from this seat in the house, but I want to say this artwork, by the way, is by Mookie, who is a sex shaman, crossed over to the other side. And before she did, she gave her blessings because she, you know, because it's a compilation of 20 sex shamans telling their stories, their journeys. So my story is one of them. We have Baba Dez, Bruce Lyon, Crystal Dawn, Deborah Tajanopol, who's also crossed over to the other side, Ohad and Raffaello, like a lot of the facilitators in this festival are authors of this this book, and that's brand new, and it just came out right before COVID hit. So I would love for you to delve into these worlds. They're very personal, very juicy, and they give a transmission. So that's my I guess shameless self-promotion, my commercial interruption for the moment. But it's a huge labor of love, you know, writing this book with these co-authors, and I would love for you to benefit from it, and also let me know what you think of it. I've heard it's very transformative from people who are on the path. It's like having guides who will model qualities of what's to come on the path. And I do have a couple other workshops that I'll be leading during the festival. You can look that up on the schedule. The homework for you is that, you know, we've done this investigation. It's like we're going through our own timeline. We're looking at our inner opposite and our own maturity, and we want to be responsible about what are the beliefs, both limiting and sometimes like the praise and the appreciation that we have for the opposite gender is a reflection of what's disowned. Have you heard this before? The golden shadow, like where you're like, oh, you're so amazing and beautiful, and actually, but I'm not. There's a feeling of like, let me give my power away to another. Sometimes we do that to the opposite sex. So doing the excavation of, you know, what are my unquestioned feelings when I say men are, women are, trans people are, like what are those snap judgments, and let me make a list of that and take inventory. And then if you did cover your eye to access, because the eyes will cross over to the opposite side of the brain, and if you're going to access your left brain or your right brain in order to access your feminine or your masculine side, then we only had time to do one side today. There's immense value to really feeling into both sides, because that's what, you know, that's what it takes for the marriage, is the two individuals and the Holy Third. And so with those two pieces of homework, I invite you to, you know, deepen the humility. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you've done these kinds of exercises or done work on your masculine or your feminine. Marriage is an ongoing process. Like, you're not, oh, I'm married, it's done. It's like, oh, actually, happily ever after was the greatest lie ever told. That's the moment the work starts. We're married. Now, let's get busy. Well, it's been a pleasure to spend this morning, afternoon, evening with you around the world. I look forward to more. And if you want to open the lines, Sharon, go ahead and do that so that we can have people say goodbye as they leave. And also I wanted to acknowledge and thank you, Sharon, for being our tech support. It was really helpful. Thank you. So you can unmute yourself if you want to say goodbye or thank you or blessings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you very much, KamalaDevi.
Thank you, KamalaDevi.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very exciting.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
you, everybody.
Amanda, for the session.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Good. And Sharon, do you know how to save the comments?
Yeah, I saved them. I
Okay.
will send it.
Great. I'll look forward to that. Thank you. Did anyone have any